I just want to thank a few people real quickly this morning. You know, about a month ago, I had some college students from Ozark Christian College stop in, and they said, "Hey, James, we need a project." And I said, "Hey, I got one." And so I had this idea of True Charity Initiative brewing, but really didn't have any help to see it take traction. And so just wanted to thank the guys that have been helping. Gus, thank you very much, and Jamin and Jeremy, and I think Cody's been out at the registration desk. But you guys, you know, if I was the guy giving the grades, straight A's on this project. So thank you very much. And Gary, wanted to thank you for coming and filming this. I think that we really are truly doing something that is a new beginning. It's a new start. I got that sense last night. It's almost like we're breaking into something that we haven't really been to before. And it's kind of a foreign feeling almost. But I welcome it because I know it's necessary, and I think we all do. So I just want to thank Gary for coming and filming today. And my staff, I see Laurie back there, but certainly my staff at Water Gardens Gospel Rescue Mission, Jim, have picked up some slack in the last month while my attention has been a little bit diverted. And so also my wife, who's still roaming around back there by the food, Marcia, who has quietly served and allowed me to divert a lot of time. So, okay, I have some fun stuff this morning to share with you. We're going to start, the lecture's titled Solidarity with the Poor, and it'll be a minute before you understand why it is that I would start with 30 apples on the left and 30 apples on the right. But this is an illustration. We're going to do the apple illustration. I actually gave an illustration like this, similar to a room full of homeless guys in our shelter, and they caught it. It wasn't quite as illustrious as this, but I think that you'll enjoy this, and you might capture the thought and share it as you go along. Ready? You've got 30 apples on the left, 30 apples on the right. You can count them if you want, but I've done so a couple of times. I think I'm correct. There's a white woman doctor. She earns 30 apples. We got a black man. Maybe he's working in the tech industry or something, but he makes 30 apples. We'll try to be as politically correct with this thing as we can, okay? So we've got 30 apples earned, 30 apples earned. The government comes along and takes 18 apples from her, but the government only takes 3 apples from him. Is that fair? No, right. And it's okay to get into response here. I know it's early, but you can say, every time I say, is that fair? The answer will be no. All right, another 30 apples, right? Okay, this time it's this sweet Asian family. They've got a little thing of, maybe it's farming. I don't know, maybe they're apple farmers, but whatever it is, they earn 30 apples. And then there's these neighbors. They get together and they've got a small business, and they start a small business. They earn 30 apples as well, right? Well, the government comes along, takes 18 apples from the Asian family, only takes 3 apples from the small business. Is that fair? No. Okay, well, let's keep trying. What about these guys in wheelchairs? They're disabled. Uh-oh, I know you're thinking, man, he's going to pick on disabled people. Here these guys are disabled. Of course, they don't look like the kind of guys I want to pick on. And they've got, they get together and they have this race every year, and it draws people in, and they sell some tickets, and they make 30 apples. Well, you got this other guy. He's a single racer, but he works his tail off. He's always going uphill the wrong way, working more muscles than what you can imagine. And he actually gets a little sponsorship because of all his work, and he makes 30 apples as well. And guess what? The government comes along and decides they're going to take 18 of his apples and only 3 of his. Is that fair? No. No. Okay. Well, let's keep going. What about these guys? They come back. They do it again next year because it's great. So they got 30 apples. They do it the next year. Here's a young lady, and she's, I don't know. What do you think? What does she look like she's doing? Okay, all right. So she's in the music industry or something, but she's been working hard at it, and as a result, she earns 30 apples, and the government comes along, and sure enough, as you might suspect, they take 18 apples from her, 3 apples from them. Is that fair? No. Well, you have a whole bunch of people. And they say, hey, we just love like recycling. And so it was fun to do. We go, we collect a bunch of cans, we go, we sell them, and we earn 30 apples. That's cool, isn't it? These 5 people over here, they put their heads together. Thank you. I got a little laugh there. They put their heads together, and they actually earn 30 apples by putting their heads together. And the government comes along, takes 18 of their apples, and takes 3 of their apples. Is that fair? No, that's not fair. Well, let's just get real simple about it here, okay? There are 5 happy faces, and there are 75 happy faces. Okay? Are there 6?
Yeah.
Oh, no! Erase 1 in your mind. There should be 5. Isn't that bad? I even counted the other 75, but somehow I messed up on the...
74, Tim.
You should copy and paste 75 times. It takes a while. Anyway, okay, so this guy, he's not supposed to be there. There are 5 happy faces, because the numbers mean something here. 5 happy faces, 75 happy faces. The government comes along and takes from those 5, 18 apples, takes from these 75, only 3. Is that fair? No. No, it's not. So let's look at this graph, which is one of the most interesting representations of what's really going on in our nation today, as far as a march towards socialism, in my opinion. This is from the Heritage Foundation. What you're looking at right now is a share of income earned. And this graph is going from 1980 to 2009. Now what you're looking at here are the top 1% of earners, and then from 5 to, I guess, 4. But the point is from here up, that's your top 5. Just like the 5 happy faces. If you were to say, you know, it's all 100 people, there's your top 5%, your top 5 happy faces. And they are earning, well, let's see, that would be about 10, 20, about 30% of all earned income. How many apples? They got 30 apples, right? So there's your 30 apples right there out of the 100. So in 2009, the top 5 are earning about 30%. Well, look at this. The bottom, how many? 75. The bottom 75 are earning 10, 20, about 30 apples, maybe 32, somewhere in there, about 30 apples. And yet, when you look at what's taken, you ready for this? This is the share of taxes paid. Those top 5, 60%, no, it's more than that, isn't it? It's 20, 40, no, 60, right? 60%, which is 18 apples. And so down here, you have about 10%, maybe a little bit more. There's your 3 apples. So this is exactly what's happening. Now, just to go back and look at that, the more you see that skew occur, the more we move toward socialism in this nation. And so we've said this is just not fair. We all agree, right? So we need to communicate this to people, because these guys may be happy. These guys aren't looking too good. Hey, there's 5. I got it right that time. And of course, I won't even describe what's happening with that, but that's a nightmare right there. So, all right. It's important, but let me say this. If we've gathered together this morning because of our weariness of wealth redistribution, or of our concern of encroaching socialism, or of our desire to even steward resources more effectively, we will lose the argument for change. I mean, these are important things, but I'm telling you that if this is our charge, we will lose the argument for change. The focus must remain, and rightly so, on our fellow man, caring for our fellow man as a creation of God. How we steward our lives to help our fellow man, how we exercise solidarity with the poor is key to the success of this initiative. To start our discussion, I wanted to consider this thought recorded by a Scottish historian, Alexander Tytler, at the turn of the 18th century. He says the historical cycle seems to be this. We go from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance. I like that. From abundance to selfishness. I don't like that. From selfishness to apathy, from apathy to dependency, and from dependency back to bondage again. Now this makes sense because it is by faith that we find the courage to break free. And it is true that when we are set free from whatever the bondage is, that we see a new horizon of dreams that suddenly become attainable. And we begin to get busy. And there's some work and there's some production that begins to happen between this liberty and abundance. And then what we see is a shift to a focus on consumption. A shift in focus often occurs in the presence of abundance. One from finding joy and establishing identity through the act of creation to a pursuit of joy and identity through consumption. It's kind of the difference between being a producerist and a consumerist. The consumerist would say something like, this is identity from a consumerist mindset. I wear Nike, therefore I'm an athlete. Or I wear camouflage, therefore I'm a soldier. Or I drink Starbucks, therefore I'm cultured. Or whatever, right? The producerist, it's funny that many of you related to that. There's a producerist would say something like, I paint, therefore I'm an artist. I draw up legal documents, therefore I am an attorney. I fix cars, therefore I am a mechanic. Producerism to consumerism is a process of disconnecting who we are from what we do to what we have. God is clear that what we consume doesn't define us. What we wear, he says, don't worry about it. What we eat, he says, it's of no eternal significance. What income do we make? He said, the widow with 2 mites gave more than all the rest. None of it defines us. It is by our fruit that we're known. It's what comes out of a man that either honors him or defiles him, but it's not what goes in that defiles him or defines him. So it is more what we do that defines us than it is what we have. So the focus on producing shifts to abundance and consuming. And because some of that abundance I don't possess and you do, well, I'd like to have some of it. There comes in selfishness. I mean, there's an abundance, but I still don't have what you have, and I'd like to have some of it. Some of the phrases that we use are signs that we've taught and bought into this consumerist mindset. Consider this. In the end, you'll probably be able to finish this. In the end, he who dies with the most toys wins. Instead of, in the end, he who unloads the most toys wins. How about work hard, play hard. Instead of work hard and enjoy it. How about this? Thank God it's Friday. Instead of thank God it's Monday. Right, I know that's like, man, you gotta be kidding me. So anti-American culture, thank God it's Monday. But really, think about God's intent in the very beginning. In the garden, when society was perfect in every way, and Adam was in perfect solidarity in every way, the command was to work and keep the garden. production, work, and keep, stewardship. Production and stewardship were focuses for man in a perfect world. To have a distaste for work, but a taste for pleasure at its end. Let me say this again. To have a distaste for work, but to have a taste for the pleasure at its end is to live under the curse of Genesis 3. You will eat, that's the good end to this, you will eat by means of painful labor all the days of your life. But as Christ has liberated us from the curse, we now take joy in our labor with more attention on the miracle of creative effort than on the fruit of that effort. Important, important, important. The options do seem to be love work, be content, or despise work and want. It is the latter that's pervasive in America today, the poor included, as I've watched a self-centered and contagious chase for government-subsidized cell phones, food stamps, housing, unwarranted disability benefits, and a whole lot of other things. And I see apathy take its hold. And this type of selfishness does certainly lead to apathy, for the pursuit of want is a road with no end, is it not? We know that, don't we? The pursuit of want is a road with no end, and eventually one tires of the walk and simply sits in the dust of the street. King Solomon wrote much about the vanity of this pursuit. He wrote, "When I considered all that I had accomplished, everything he built, all that he had achieved," he says, "I found everything to be futile in a pursuit of the wind. There was nothing to be gained under the sun." He also wrote, "The one who loves money is never satisfied with money, and whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with income. This too is futile. When good things increase, the ones who consume them multiply. What then is the profit to the owner except to gaze at them with his eyes?" And then get this right here. "The sleep of a worker is sweet, whether he eats little or much." The chase for much is vain and leads to apathy. Arthur Brooks, a researcher and president of the American Enterprise Institute, has researched and published articles on the cause of happiness. And he writes, "Not surprisingly, unearned money, while it may help alleviate suffering, carries with it no personal satisfaction. Studies of lottery winners, for instance, show that after a brief period of increased happiness, their moods darken as they no longer derive the same enjoyment from the simple pleasures in life, and as the glow of buying things wears off." Wasn't there a lottery winner in Joplin? My wife and I were saying we need to find that person and say, "Listen, this is going to do you harm. We know this really great charity in town. You'll be happier, trust me." The same results, he goes on to write, the same results emerge with other kinds of unearned income. So see, it's just about unearned income. The same apathy, darkness, results from different types of unearned income. Welfare payments, for example, according to a University of Michigan study, statistically shows that going on the welfare rolls increases the likelihood of a person saying that she or he has felt, and here was the definition, inconsolably sad over the past month. Of course, the misery of welfare recipients probably goes well beyond the check itself. Nonetheless, studies show that recipients are far unhappier than equally poor people who do not receive such government benefits. I'm going to read that again. Studies show that recipients are far unhappier than equally poor people who do not receive such government benefits. The poor happier off of welfare? Can a second or maybe even third generation dependent upon welfare be convinced of this? Surely success in this endeavor to provide alternatives to state welfare depends partially and maybe to a great extent upon affecting the viewpoint and the mindset of current welfare recipients. Our solidarity with the poor is key to changing the poverty mindset. And yet, it is not the reason for the cause of solidarity. The reason is simply that God loved us and does love us. And in so doing, when he revealed himself to us, gave us a divine revelation, not only of our own worth and potential, but of the other's worth and potential. This revelation breaks the hold of want and lack and is rooted in acceptance and community. Recognition of inherent worth and like destinies. We're all going to the same place. If we're all going to the same place, doesn't matter whether I get there in a Lamborghini or on horseback. It really doesn't matter. Recognition of inherent worth and like destinies relieves us from the pursuit of keeping up with the Joneses. Solidarity. Now, it's kind of a new topic to me, I'll be honest with you. I've been trying to read up on it. And a lot of the things I read, I'm not connecting with. A lot of thoughts on the topic. For example, one book that's currently on the market, and I think in its title is Solidarity with the Poor, contends that a life of less indulgence or even fasting brings us into greater solidarity with the poor. I don't see that. In fact, on the back of the book it says, the author invites readers on a journey of self-examination, discipline, and renewed focus on Jesus that will change their lives forever. He challenges readers to eat like the poor for 40 days in solidarity with a much neglected group of people and to donate the money they save on groceries to a charity. Well, I like the donate money to the charity part, so I'll go for that part. But the rest of it, I don't think so. I'm just saying that solidarity is not about self-examination, and it's not about eating like the poor. It really is about Isaiah 58:10 that says, extend your soul to the hungry. Some versions say, give yourself to the hungry. We may at first think that solidarity with the poor requires that we lessen our material load, but the condition of your material state does not have a bearing on your ability to be in solidarity with a person. And so the definitions of solidarity with the poor range from an increased consciousness of the poor to self-denial, to be like the poor, to increasing the time that you serve the poor. Might even include living among the poor. But solidarity really, and I love this definition from the Collins Dictionary of Sociology, it's the integration and degree and type of integration shown by a society or group with people and their neighbors. Key in on the word integration for just a second. Integration derived from the word integer, meaning whole, entire, complete, one. And so, the true sign of integration or solidarity is exchange. Now, if there was one line I would say take out of this lecture, it's that right there. The true sign of integration or solidarity is exchange. Consider the human body as a prime example. So now I get to think medical for a second, which I feel very comfortable with. That's my background. But consider the human body. Is there any greater example of solidarity? I mean, how many are you? If anybody says 2, I want to talk with you. Well, we'll pray. You are one, right? I mean, that's solidarity. Your body is you are in one body solidarity. Look at what's going on just in your body. Is there any part of your body that does not exchange, both receive and provide. Every single cell receives, does it not? Every cell in your body that's alive is receiving oxygen, glucose, sugar, amino acids to build proteins, water. I mean, every cell is receiving, and yet every single cell is also producing. Every single cell has a function, a purpose, and is providing. And if your body is not in that type of solidarity, one in which there is exchange, then you're sick. Just like a community that is not in solidarity with the poor. Exchange. Solidarity has much less to do with material self-denial or even the environment in which we place ourselves to live, and much more to do with our expectation. Do we expect ourselves to be the providers and the poor to be receivers, or the poor to be providers and us to be receivers? Solidarity answers both questions. Yes, we must expect exchange. But I want to caution you, it's more than an expectation to earn what you need or work for your meals. I mean, these are good things, and we do them at our mission. But these techniques can easily fall short of true solidarity because I'm providing training, or I'm providing development, or I'm providing work ethic improvement. Not bad things, but it may very well, and I believe it often does, fall short of the true humility and deconstructed hierarchy that's required for true solidarity. Solidarity does not recognize haves and have-nots. It sees at times haves as have-nots and have-nots as haves. When solidarity of this kind is realized in a person, it causes a frightening leap in state of mind that changes how we encourage the poor. Suddenly, where we used to say, hey, I believe that you can give back to your community, that becomes instead, hey, I think I'm one in this community who is in need of what you have. It's a different thing. So I want to tell you a story that I have just told my friends and my family. I haven't ever shared it in a public setting, but I want to share it today. In November of 2010, God called me to go live on the streets. And it was a very strange thing, as you can imagine, to hear that. And I heard it once, I heard it twice, I heard it 3 times. And each time I was telling my wife, God's telling me I need to go live on the streets. And she can imagine what she's saying. I'm going to send you to a doctor, honey. And so it was, I think it was on the 3rd time, she said, God will tell me, too, if he's going to take my husband away from me to go live on the streets. And I was, you know how guys can be, I was like, no, maybe not, I don't know. But it's true. And he did. He told her, and she wept. And the next day I left with the clothes on my back, and no phone, no computer, no nothing. And I began walking. And I lived homeless by the rules that were downloaded by God to me about how it was to go, where I couldn't have the conveniences of a car, etc. And it was not for any purpose other than to be in a time of fasting and prayer for shelter. Our mission was a day outreach, but it was not an emergency shelter, and we needed more shelter in our community, and this is what God called me to do. But what I want to tell you about really is that in sleeping on the streets and living with the homeless for, it was about 12 days, I think, somewhere along those lines, it was dusk. And I don't think there was anybody around but me and this other homeless guy named Ralph. And you know, it's very boring being homeless. And so I was just hanging with Ralph, and I was hungry. I think on that particular day, maybe nothing was served for lunch, and I was hungry, and Ralph had a sandwich. And I remember it was a white bread sandwich. I don't remember what was in it, but it was cut in half into 2 triangular pieces, just like Mom used to cut them, you know. And he looked at me and he said, James, you want half of my sandwich? Now I'll tell you, everything of my experience in ministry, my whole paradigm of ministry shouted out, don't you take that sandwich from that homeless guy. But you know what? I was hungry, and I was weak, and I was in need. And when I took that half a sandwich, there was like the greatest sigh of relief in me that it was okay. And this facade of strength and piousness just came crumbling to the ground. Solidarity, exchange. So I ask you, should the church today consider maybe canceling its Christmas dinner plans for the poor and instead join them in their rundown rental for some bologna and cheese? Relatively speaking, is this not what Christ did? Mind you, the one through whom all things were created, when he called Zacchaeus down from the tree and said, I'm going to come to your house, the Son of God, and I'm going to eat dinner in your house. Was the humility of Christ and his solidarity with poor mankind not modeled when he found himself thirsty and tired and asked a Samaritan woman for a drink of water? And consider touch for a second. Just the fact that we use this term outreach all the time, outreach, is a clear sign that we've been ingrained to reach out and touch the poor, to embrace them, to heal them, to lay hands on them, to pray. But do we ever consider letting them touch us? I was not long ago pulling a weekend shift at a nursing home, and I was in the Alzheimer's unit. And a very elderly lady was in her wheelchair, and I was supposed to try to get her out of the wheelchair and walk with her. Mind you, I'm the therapist. I'm the physical therapist there. I'm going to serve her. I'm going to help her. And I'm going to get her better. And, right? I mean, it's outreach. I'm outreaching to this woman. And we get out into the hallway, and she grabs hold of my shirt and just begins to pull me down like this. And I get down on my knees, and she reaches out her hand, and she just begins to touch my face. And she says, I love you. Now, I could have said, man, this is inappropriate. I'm here to serve you. We need to get up and get walking, okay? Enough of this. But the truth is, there was something very special that happened as I just received that from her. So it wasn't just me coming to love her and help her and strengthen her. I was brought there because she had something to give me. Solidarity with the poor. So I want you to recall the graph at the beginning of this talk, because we've got to ask the question. Well, let me back up a little bit. Concerning touch, I just want you to consider Christ's example. He really allowed people to touch him. The sick, the crowds, the children, the prostitutes. I mean, he allowed people to touch him. Sometimes I think we need to think more about that. Again, we're talking about exchange. Maybe this solidarity that I speak of will eliminate one-way giving, not out of man's design or plan, but rather by what true humility demands, that we recognize the poor might be called to serve you or me, to feed you or me, to draw a drink of water for you or me. And by providential and beautiful design, the poor may touch our lives, and we may be the ones who are changed. Now, how does this help us provide just and effective alternatives to state welfare? Because that's what we're trying to get to. Well, I want you to recall the graph at the beginning of the talk. Realizing alternatives to state welfare by convincing legislators alone is unlikely. Charlie, would you agree with that? Okay. I mean, we're going to have a hard time if all we do is march up to Jefferson City and say, hey, this is what we want. We must convince the people. True solidarity will work to that end, among others. Convince them of what? That they're less consumers focused on lack and want than they are producers with capacity, potential, and gifting. If we succeed at that, then what we're talking about is taking people who are now, many would say, past apathy to dependence in this nation, and bring them back into a place where they realize they have capacity, potential, and are producers, restoring liberty. Is it possible for a poor person to realize the detriment of a handout? It is. Is it possible for the poor to focus more on stewarding the little they have rather than wanting the much that they don't? It is. And I'm going to show you an example now of a Ugandan village that had some great struggles. And when it came to the point of, hey, you know what? We're really bad off here. We better turn to the West for aid. They said, no, let's look at what God has given us and be good stewards of it. And we'll see how that goes. So watch this video with me.
As I reflect back on the journey of my life, I think about how God directed me to Kampala for that workshop. I had a burden for my church to give from their hearts and not out of duty. But I never thought it would take such a horrible situation for me and my town to realize that we all needed to change.
In 2001, the ADF Army undertook many regions of western Uganda, forcing over 80,000 survivors into the turmoil and destitution of refugee camps. Among these were the people of Bundibujo. As the war raged on, the people's hope faded, and many were tempted to give up hope altogether. But the pastor of Bundibujo chose to see this situation differently, as an opportunity to teach his people to experience God's gift of stewardship.
My name is Hannington Bahemuka, but most people call me Bishop Hannington. The life in the camps was very bad because families would crowd in the shack houses, children would go without food for 1, 2, 3 days, water was not available, and death started resulting within a short time.
Kandi obwira obutwalaraga njala tugiye sala babaguli mwaka gwa 1997 bakabonabona ubulemu bwakahoyomo barakwenda sukulu bakabulaga kitabo kibabura ndubi bakala kubonabona.
Like the others, Hannington was left with almost nothing. All he possessed were his notes from a recent workshop he had attended, a workshop on stewardship. Perhaps, he thought, God was telling him something.
The Lord spoke to my heart about putting into practice what I had learned at the workshop. I had been taught that everything we have belongs to God. So even in this refugee camp, God has put abundant resources for his work. So I called upon the believers to start sharing what they have with the needy.
Apunga Bishop Hannington Bahemuka atuleteraga bageni batwegesia kigambo kyokugaba.
In the camps, we started a campaign to provide blankets to the orphans, and it was the first time we saw the principles come to life.
Niwega bali kurungi nkamumanya nanga kanyamba tinakulu.
After 2 miserable years in the refugee camp, it was safe to return home to Bundibujo. But what they found was only a shadow of the home they once knew.
The houses had been torn down, the farms had nothing in them, churches had been demolished, schools were devastated.
Tukaba tuli omukasomya k'omuhito okubonabona n'amajunega kaniye. Hawe ebizibu ebituli nabyo mu makanisa abantu kyabangwera kuhayo sente.
Their needs were enormous, leaving people to ask the all too common question, how can the people from the West help us? But Hannington urged his people to ask a different question.
I asked, how soon can my people rise to the challenge of funding not only their immediate needs, but their futures as well? I told the people at that time that God has given us everything we need to rebuild our community. And what he needed was others to make themselves available to him, and he was going to use us. And those of us who are mechanics, those of us who are business people, they can use their gifts and the trade that they have to build their community.
Na gua dumbi na tua mukwe kwatia mukama nenku gisanja kantigie sio na kolaki dumbi obutwa guria nyanya mto kwera mto bareke to kubara.
One by one, person by person, the idea caught on, and before they knew it, their home was being rebuilt.
So we started from scratch. We began to rebuild our churches, provided homes and schooling for the orphans, and the needs of the people were met. We have a lady in our church. She is lame, but one day we were calling upon people to bring their gifts to come and build a church.
Katanika bakageba tia kwesa mtima wanje kina yonkoko mwana wanje kamudia kamwaya bona wanje ne kanisha futu yangu.
And today the church she worships in is made of bricks, and we look at that as a wonderful example of gracious giving.
Singisie kabo kandi tukwegwa abantu abongera kemo kolera ruha mukiaro engabanija yatunga kutoka.
Inspired by a biblical understanding of stewardship, the people of Bundibujo knew that to rebuild their town, they must first use the gifts they already possessed. They understood that God had blessed them with resources and talents, and that through the careful stewardship of those gifts, they could themselves create the wealth necessary to rebuild their home and take care of their needs.
And this message can work in every situation, in every country, because surely generosity is transformational. People think that being rich is having a lot of wealth, money and possessions. But before God, being rich starts from the spirit. That is appreciation of whatever God has given you, and thinking of how you can use that for the advancement of his kingdom.
Isn't that a great video? Yeah. Why not in Joplin? Why can't that happen in Joplin? It can. Again, to a great extent, it is the consumerist focus of lack and want among the poor in America that fuels the demand for aid, for charity. And please listen carefully. What we give in response to that demand will determine our path either to apathy, dependency, and bondage, or to liberty. By God's grace, as we gain greater understanding of solidarity with our fellow man, we'll begin caring less about a right response to poverty and more about a right relationship with the poor, one that involves exchange. Again, if we're always the one serving, the one reaching, the one giving, and the one touching, we'll fail at truly empowering and ennobling the poor. Real solidarity with the expectation of exchange eliminates the distinctions community of the poor and community of the rich. It makes one community, and in it is mutual acceptance, love, and grace, wherein man finds freedom to try and fail, to risk and lose, to trial and err. It allows for those processes, the same ones by which you and I have grown and continue to learn. Solidarity with God may be considered the point of conception for true charity, but it's coming into solidarity with the poor that births it. Thank you.